and welcome to the Unhinged History Podcast, the podcast where two people who struggle to count to four meet up and try to tell each other stories about history. I'm Theresa.
I'm Angie. That was amazing.
I don't know where that came from. So
Keep it. I love it.
right? I mean, I don't think I've ever struggled to count to four unless it was in a foreign language. And even then, it depends on the language.
Yeah, I think it would really depend on the language because I think once you get past 3, 4's right there, you know?
I mean, you would think.
Yeah. Unless you're really hungry and you're trying to tell them you would like 4 tacos.
You know what is hilarious to me is Mike was on Duolingo. This was a while ago now. And he said this, he showed me a word. He goes, "What's this word?" And I went, "Oh, that's like the number 3." And he goes, "No, san is a number 3." It's like, yeah, but that's if you're counting just standard. But if you're counting cylindrical objects, you say it like this. If you're counting animals, you say it like this. If you're counting ships, you say it. And he goes, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, they have different counting systems." And he looked at me like I was lying to him and trying to really railroad his education in a foreign language.
I love that. And were you?
No, I was being legitimate. But the person, because we were at Ani's horse riding lessons, and there was another parent behind us, and she was listening, and she just went, I
gotta
I don't like
go.
any of this. Like, this is why I'm not learning Japanese.
That is hilarious. Poor Mike. I
So what
mean,
have you been up to?
we had, another busy week trying to get our acts together. My oldest son keeps reminding me that school starts in just a couple of weeks, and I keep reminding him that he has his own 2 feet. He could walk. That's not true. He can't walk that
No,
far.
about to say,
But
like,
anyway,
wait, it's not true that he doesn't have 2 feet because I've met both sons. I can
can
vouch for
vouch for their
their
feet.
number of feet.
No, it's this that I would never tell him he could actually make that walk because there is a whole like 2-mile section of it that is like highway.
I mean, but have you seen the Japanese show Old Enough, where they have like toddlers running errands, where the toddler is sent alone for a half-mile walk to the grocery store with a $10 bill and just expected to pick up the 4 very specific items and walk home?
I have heard of it. I have not seen it. I think I might have seen a clip of one once, but this has been oldest son's like biggest gripe in life is that I won't let him walk from anywhere that like where we live to anywhere else because there
He's
is no
he's
way to do it.
past the kidnapping size.
He is past the kidnapping size, but what he is not past is the dumb drivers hitting him where there is no place to stand size.
Oh, you know what? That checks. I concede.
Right? So there's like no sidewalks in our immediate area. PETA, I do let him ride his bike into town, like he can do that, but into the main town, no, it's too far.
Mm.
There's too much open highway with no shoulder or anything for him to be safe on, and he thinks that I'm just a big curmudgeon, and I'm cool with that. Live your best life, bud.
We have to hate our parents for something, and it's better that than hating who he is as a person.
I feel like he thinks that I'm the villain now, but one day he's gonna be like, "Oh, I get it."
Yeah, I have kids. I too don't want them mowed down by a 1957 Chevy,
It,
which it would be an iconic way to go.
I mean, if you're gonna do it, yeah. But he's almost of driving age anyway, so I'm not worried about it anymore. Yeah,
That's fair. And then you could make him cart his younger brother around and free
he's
up Angie's time.
he is going to be my Uber driver.
It's going to be great at first, because he's going to be like, yeah, I can drive anywhere I want. And it's going to be, hey, bud, here's a $5 bill. Go get me some sour cream. But
That
I
is
wanted to, no, you're going to go get me some
he
sour cream.
he literally, okay, the amount of times, so right down the street from our house we have like the little town, right? So it's just like maybe a quarter mile away. and there's like a little bodega type grocery store
Hmm.
right there on the main street. The amount of times I have sent him with his backpack to go get me like the random one thing. Like, I need you to
Yeah.
get me green onions. I need you to get me whatever. And he loves doing it. But one time I sent him to get, I feel like this is gonna sound silly, but I feel like it was eggs. And he did not take his backpack with him. He was like trying to figure out how to get home. It was something like eggs. Like, if it was something like delicate like that. So if
I
it
mean,
wasn't,
just go with eggs. You know, for the sake of the story, he had to get eggs. And if he's going to be like, Mom, it was grenades or whatever, who
he,
knows?
he didn't think about it till he got there and realized he did not have his backpack. So how he was going to get back without them.
So I have a similar story, but one I completely did to myself.
Okay.
There was so living in Japan, um, I ended up hearing that they had this, I think it was called like the friendship boat or something, but this big boat that traveled the world that had a ton of books on it. Um, it was pulling into the port in my city.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I'm going to go. I'm going to go see what they have. And I got there and they had like a copy of Frankenstein, and I'd left my copy in the US. And they had, for whatever reason, they had an unabridged dictionary that I needed. I needed. And so I bought it, right? And so I have my two books. I'm so stoked. I'm starting to come home. And then I realized I didn't have a backpack. And because the way I was living in Japan was basically all cash based, I didn't have money for a taxi because I had blown it on the dictionary. And this dictionary is freaking heavy. And the plastic handbag is cutting into all of my flesh, no matter where I try to situate it. And I'm walking the who knows how long it was back to the house. And I'm thinking, I know the joy of this was an unabridged dictionary, but do I need the section of X? Because it's really heavy.
Could I just remove a handful of letters I wasn't fond of to begin with?
Right. Like this is not my favorite move. And I got all the way back to the house and I don't know what my hands look like afterwards.
Did
But
you eventually just like wrap them up in the bag and carry them all a schoolgirl, like, on
I
your
think
hip
I did a
kind of
bit of
thing?
everything. I'm sure there was a chunk of time they were balanced on my head like I was carrying water back from the river.
Okay. We all have our learning moments. Yours was a unabridged dictionary with the entire section of X.
And your son's was a carton of eggs,
It really he
presumably,
and if I remember right, he made it back with no spillage. He did
because he
good.
was afraid of having to go back and get another thing of eggs because you would have said, no, I needed the full dozen.
Like, I don't know what you were doing, bud.
We're making
What?
devil's eggs, like deviled eggs. I need the full carton.
He loves deviled eggs. I guarantee you that if he would have broke one, he would have just turned around and went back on his own. Like,
Yeah.
because like, that's what he's told me like recently, like that one he understands that once he gets his license that he knows he's my grocery getter,
Yeah.
but he fully embraces the idea because now he can go to the store and buy the things and get the snack without mom telling him no.
See, and that's the joy.
Like, hey, you know what? If that's your driving factor, buy all the beef jerky you want, buddy.
So I gotta say, I am interested in hearing your story.
Are you?
I am.
Why? What if I said?
You haven't like given me any hints that I've gone like, Angie, what have you got for me this time? But I feel like I'm bringing an Angie story today, and I don't know if you're bringing a Theresa story.
I okay, I'll go first then. I don't know whose story this is, but what I will tell you is that I heard about it first from a Facebook post that I thought was an advertisement for like a Kindle book.
This is already sounding like an Angie story.
I know, absolutely was. And I read the post and I was like, this is wild. No way. And then I had to Google it because I didn't believe that it ended up being some like article from some obscure Facebook group that was like advertising, like you might like this group type thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh, okay. So I Googled it, and lo and behold, it was a real story about real people. And I was like, okay, I freaking love this. And I planned on holding it in my back pocket for a while until I realized today that we're recording in the morning and I have places to drive, so I can't be drinking any mint juleps. So I chose this story.
Okay.
So my sources
Mm-hmm.
are an article on womeninexploration.org, another mental floss article because they're just so much fun. TaraRoss.com, she has a blog post about it, which I didn't read heavily into, but I really liked the way she told the story. And then an expeditionportal.com, pioneers of moto history, the Van Buren sisters 1916 ride across America. Have you ever heard of the Van Buren sisters?
No,
Okay, cool.
but I am loving that they started a riot.
No, they didn't. I'm sorry, not a riot, a ride.
Oh, well,
Ride, R-I-D-E.
that changes the tenor of the subject.
But just hold on, because you might still end up loving it regardless.
You're right. Like the
So,
fact that it's not a riot that has me upset. I think I'll be back. I got to call my therapist.
I'll wait.
Yeah.
um, so my story starts on the eve of the U.S. entering World War I. Two sisters of a well-to-do upbringing want to help in the war effort in any way they can. So this is a story of Augusta and Adeline. They prefer their nicknames of Gussie and Addie. Gussie was born in March of 1884. She's the eldest sister, and Addie was born in July of 1889. They were born into the upper wealthy echelons of New York society, descendants of the 8th president, Martin Van Buren.
Okay. That's what I would have
Who,
assumed.
right? I know. Who I learned in my search about them was actually the first president to be born a citizen of the United States. Like,
Repeat that?
just, he was the first president to be born as a citizen of the United States. He was born
Okay.
in
Yep.
1782.
Yeah.
Which I thought that
Okay.
was really interesting. However, English was not technically his first language. Dutch was what was spoke at home.
You know,
But
Van Buren, I
right
could make those kind of things, but I mean, shoot, my last name is Potratz and I don't speak Polish, so
here we are. um, but this is the story about him. I just thought those were some interesting facts I learned while making the connection. But this is a story of his descendants, the Van Buren sisters. Their childhood, in my opinion, could be characterized as very non-traditional for the time. Their mother died when they were young, and their father raised them right alongside their brother. So they swam, they canoed, they dove, they boxed, they played outside.
so this is some very Julie Dobney vibes.
Yeah, but without the negative parts of Julie Dobney's younger life.
She was allowed
Um,
to wear pants and learned how to fence.
she
But
did,
okay, but
but
like didn't
like,
become the mistress. Well, I'm assuming they
yeah.
don't become the mistress of dad's boss.
Right, these girls did not become dad's boss mistresses. One of the things that they loved to do was motorcycles. They loved to ride motorcycles. And how, in my opinion, like how absolutely scandalous in 1916 is that for a high society lady to do, right? Um,
Could you
so
imagine real quick, you're sitting at your formal dinner. You've got the silver that's been shined and polished. You've got the courses lined up in the servant's kitchen waiting to come out. And then two Harleys pull up in the front yard.
yes. I say, Charles, did you invite them again?
Yeah, pretty much. Like that just sounds brilliant.
I 100% believe that was these women in a nutshell. And I think it's awesome because they're living in a time when, like, one article called it like the women of society in their gilded cages, right? Like they're expected to be pretty and host parties and raise children. Like That's it, right?
Yeah.
And these women were like, yeah, no, we will do no such thing. So they get involved previous to the US entering World War One. They get heavily involved with something called the National Preparedness Movement. Are you familiar with what this is? Because I was not. I had no clue that this was a thing.
No, but this makes me automatically go to the Boy Scouts creed or motto.
Okay, so kind of like that. Yeah, this was a campaign to increase military capabilities and convince the nation that we needed to be involved in the effort and prepared for the war at hand. So, like, yeah, I'll be prepared. Where's your Swiss Army knife? Um, these girls were all about that. They were also suffragettes, so they wanted the right to vote, and they were going to get it one way or the other. So they come up with an idea. Their idea sets out to prove two things. One, that American women and women in general can survive the harsh realities outside of their gilded cages and be useful on the front lines, even if not in a combat situation.
I cannot wait to see how they prove this.
They want to show the US Army that they can participate in the war effort as dispatch riders for the military dispatch.
What is a dispatch writer?
So my understanding is like you get your orders, you get your telegram or whatever your information packet is, you hop on a motorcycle and you drive from point A to point B, but that could be a several thousand mile trip, a several hundred mile trip, or just down the street.
Okay,
But
so
the,
they're going to Nancy Wake it, but on motorcycles and not bicycles.
right. But at this time, women are banned from military. They
But of
can't,
course, yeah, we can't.
right?
My boobs get in the way of a lot of things.
And your ovaries stop you from thinking. Truly.
Honestly, I mean, how long was it that we weren't allowed on trains that went 20 miles an hour because they were afraid our uteruses were going to fly out of our bodies?
I mean, exactly. Right? So, and I think this is really stupid. The government won't allow women to be in combat. And then they turn around and say women don't have the right to vote because they can't serve their country.
It's
It's
just
like
circular logic.
it's so stupid. So they're out to solve both problems. We will get the right to vote, and we can prove that we can be useful at some capacity, whatever that may be.
And this really bothers me because we have historical figures like Catalina de Erauso, who did a lot of very male dominated work, lived as a dude
Mm-hmm.
under the supervision of dudes
Mm-hmm.
and outduded the dudes. Like she
Every
was
time.
more brutal than the conquistadors in murdering indigenous peoples,
Every
outdueled
time.
all of them. And it was still like, yeah, but she's a nun. Yeah,
She has boobs.
her boobs are in the way. It's like, no, she very successfully like dated your wife and your sister.
She even outwooed him.
Right, like she's more dude than you.
Yes, and that is, I fully believe what these girls like. Their whole point was that we can do it. Like we are not something to be kept in a jewel box. Like
Right.
we're tough, we can handle it. Um so so they're gonna have to prove this, right? Because not only do they have to prove that they can survive just the harsh exterior conditions like the weather and things like that, but they also have to prove that they can handle the motorcycles themselves. So they have to be able to mechanically fix them with their own tools without a support staff.
Okay.
And they are driving through. So basically, at this point, anything west of Mississippi is not really mapped as far as roads go. And there are really not well known roads. They could be driving through cow pastures, wagon trails, dirt trails. Like there's not an interstate at this point. So they also have to prove that they can handle that. Like just the navigating of it alone had to be a monumental feat, right? So, the terraross.com article says this about the road. Quote, impossible roads, unseasonable weather, and difficulties untold number and magnitude were encountered at every turn. A contemporary newspaper article reported washout mountainsides, desert wastes, and wrecked bridges delayed them, but did not deter them. Incessant rains in Colorado made riding conditions the worst imaginable, and those terrific days were followed by an equally ardent week in crossing the Great American Desert in western Utah. So, like, they went through it, right? I think a lot of people back then could have probably called this a publicity stunt, because here you are seeing these two high society ladies just donning their motorcycles and they're going to go out and get some pictures, but not for them. They meant every mile of it. So, and they actually had to like train their bodies for this. Like, you don't just hop on your motorcycle and go for a 5,000 mile ride. Like,
No, I mean, you've got to work on your core.
The whole thing, right? So they train by taking longer and longer rides, farther and farther, until it's not such a physical drain and not such a mental drain as well. So they get a hold of two 410-pound, roughly. I heard one of them could have been 430 pounds, but we're going to say 410 for the sake of the story. Pound Indian Power Plus model motorcycles, which sold for roughly $275. Today, that would be $7,924 each.
Okay.
You needed to know.
Yeah. I'm such a motorcycle enthusiast. That's the one thing that you know about me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These would have been considered top of the line in the day, and they had, quote, Firestone non-skid tires and gas headlights that would allow them to barrel through the darkest nights. So they're even driving at night. Terrifying, is all I'm gonna say. I'm not really sure how gas headlights are safe, but like, it's 1916, so who am I to judge? Like,
I mean, look, in the grand scheme of things, we just left the era where we had arsenic wallpaper.
I guess that's true. One of the things that they did lack, though, were helmets. So what they did have were those cool leather caps and the goggles.
Okay, you know? I mean, honestly, I think you just need to affix some blades to that so that when you fall, it just severs your head and you feel nothing. That feels like the thing that should happen.
Okay, live your life. As well, and of course, you know, they're riding leathers, right? Okay, so I do have pictures if you want to see them.
But of course.
Okay, because these girls are just absolutely adorable. Can you see them? Oh, now you can.
Okay, so she is showing me some black and white. The first image is black and white of these two faces with ear-to-ear grins. They probably had a bath 3 days ago.
Maybe, if they're lucky.
Right. Like the one on the left, what is it? Not Angela, Augusta?
Augusta, yeah. Augusta, okay. Gussie, and then Adeline.
There's some shadowing on the teeth that could just be straight up bugs. But or it could just be the shadowing, you know, like, I take your pick. But they are the quintessential like 1920s daredevils. Yes,
absolutely, right? Like, look at this. Look at how fantastic they are. Look at those boots.
So the second image is an image in sepia where, yeah, like we're talking riding boots, flat bottomed, that go to the thigh.
They're magnificent. And the third one, this is my favorite image. Like,
they somehow kept a shirt white.
Somehow managed to keep a shirt white. But what I think is most important about this image is, despite what they were going through, they did not stop smiling. Like, they were here to bring the spirit and the joy and the proof that, like, we can do it, and we don't need no man. Here we are.
I'm gonna call hogwash. The images we have of them all smiling. There are going to be times where they are yelling and screaming and throwing stuff and angry that they can't get the damn nut off.
I mean, I'm sure that there were some moments, but like, that is what everybody said about them at the time. Like, they just had an indomitable spirit. We're here to smile and bring the show, you know?
That image right there of them on the hillside overlooking a valley. You can't tell me that wasn't taken up in your neck of the woods.
I was wondering that too when I saw this because it very, very much looks like California in
Right.
sepia.
Like if you told me that's up by Coulterville, I'd be like, yeah, okay.
Could have been. I mean, I was thinking when I was looking at it, I was thinking like San Francisco, like the
Okay.
Napa
The San
Valley
Francisco
area.
area, because San Francisco
Yeah.
is like the wharf, the very top, like it's been a city
No, no,
for
no,
a
not
okay.
not the
All right.
city part, but that area. Like it
All
has
right. All
that
right. All right. So just
windswept
rural
trees.
Bay Area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I just wanted to include those pictures because I think they're absolutely amazing. So now I need to get back to my notes the right way. Here we go. So on the 4th of July, which I think is amazing, of 1916, the ladies aged 32 and 26. So they are old maids at this
No, no,
point.
no. They are beyond old mates. Like I think what is the thing? Because we've sent that meme back and forth on like
Oh
Spinster is
yeah.
up until you're 26, and then from
Uh
27 to 30, you're labeled like
yeah.
not heretic, but I mean it was a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. Yeah, they're the next one up.
Right. Yeah.
um so but at this point they are both still unmarried. They are they have careers, they have jobs, they're doing stuff.
They're society
Um
women, so they're still on dad's payroll. Let's be honest here.
um Gussie was actually a stenographer
Oh, I take it back.
and Addie was a teacher up to this point.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind.
They are career women. Okay, this does color how I feel about them. They went from less, I'll do what I want to do to I am an independent woman. I will do what I want to do. It's same tone, well, different tone, same words.
Yeah. Yeah. So they, like I said, it's the 4th of July. They set out from New York City. So they want to stop and pay their respects at the factory that built their motorcycles. So that's Springfield, Massachusetts. And then they make it to just outside of Chicago before they encounter the first of their problems. What do you think it was?
Outside of Chicago, outside of Chicago. I'm going to say there was a cow in the motorway and they hit it.
No. It was pants. It was their pants.
When are pants the problem?
Well,
Pants are the solution for women.
Usually, yeah. So while women's fashion at this time was going through a major change, like the ladies were leaving the corsets home and opting for more flowy, comfortable attires, pants were still considered illegal for women to be seen wearing in most states.
Uh,
And the Van Burens are obviously wearing pants for the whole journey and were arrested several times. So imagine it. It's like October. You have your favorite military style, like, or in our case, our outfits probably look more like Han Solo, but fine, whatever, you get the picture. And those amazing boots that you have been dying to wear since summer started, right? Like for us, that is just a change of season. But for them, it was being arrested. Anytime they went through a little small town or anywhere outside of a major metropolis was basically like zoned to be arrested for wearing pants.
Erwin, do you see those two women? I believe they are wearing pants. You can see air between their legs.
Someone should call the sheriff. I
They have
am
a
offended.
visible thigh gap.
To point, I love this. So like I said, they were arrested several times to the point that years later, Addie's daughter would say, quote, but each time they were released with only a reprimand, provided they got out of town fast. Can you imagine? I'm gonna let you off the hook, but you and your pants, you gotta go.
Well, okay, so my cousins, they and their family, they hunt quite a bit and they go up to like Montana or some real small, I think Montana, but some real small town to do their hunting. And at one point, because I guess you can drink at a younger age, you don't have to be 21 where they were, or at least they don't enforce it. There was something like that. But I remember thinking my cousin was way too young to be drinking with me at a bar. And he goes, yeah, so I was at a bar with my dad when we were hunting, and we see these two men absolutely shit-faced. And
As you do.
the deputy comes in and just basically goes, Steve, Brian, you two need to stop drinking. how are you getting home? You're driving home? Drive fast. Just drive fast and get home. And I was just like, that's not the advice that should be given. It should be, I'm just gonna take you in the back of my cruiser. I'm gonna get you boys home. You can hitchhike back here tomorrow. I don't tell you.
I'll pick you up after church. It's fine.
Right. I mean, but it's still just like that happened. And so to hear like just get out of jail and get out of town quick. It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, so that is the mindset.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, exactly. So between the small town police and nosy ladies outside on their front porch calling their husbands in to come gawk at this, and the bad weather, their 1 month trip turns into a 2 month trip. So they are
Raising
late.
bail is kind of difficult there. So I get it.
So in August of 1916, the ladies reached the Colorado Rockies and earned the first of their records. They were the first women to reach the summit of Pikes Peak at 14,109 feet with a motor vehicle.
Okay.
However, they were very behind schedule and decided to take a more direct path through the Rockies instead of north through Wyoming. But the mountains had received so much rain that year that the dirt paths that they would have taken were turned to sticky, gross mud that trapped their tires. And the Mental Floss article gives a great description here, saying, quote, exhausted, freezing, and filthy from their fruitless efforts to free their wheels, the dejected duo were forced to abandon their bikes and seek out help on foot. Hours and miles later, the sisters slid out of the darkness upon the small mining town of Gilman, Colorado. They were quite the sight to the odd miners, two angel-faced ladies draped in leather and caked in mud.
Angel-faced.
Angel-faced ladies draped in leather and caked in mud. The miners give them food, and they look after them while they rest, and then they help them get their bikes out of the mud. Then, 100 miles west of Salt Lake City, the wind had sent the desert path away. Like it had just wiped the path clean, and the ladies found themselves very low on water and probably spirits at this point as well. In my opinion, this is probably the one time they were like, well, this sucks. We have no water. We have no path. It's 1,000 degrees outside. What are we going to do?
Right.
When along comes another miner or prospector, whatever you want to call him, with his horse and cart, which are packed with supplies, and he has a great sense of direction. So he gets them going the right way, gets them all sorted.
Great sense of direction. He probably also lives there. That's easy to have a great sense of direction when this is your home turf.
Yeah, but when you have no roads with which to mark by, I'm sure that was still a little bit of... I was excited, Theresa. My story's almost over. So, with renewed spirits and some fresh water, they set out. By September 2nd, they reach San Francisco, and then on September 8th, they complete their goal of making it all the way to LA. They continue on to the Mexican border. If you're curious, they returned home to New York via the South Pacific Railway, which I, for one, was very curious. Like, did they drive all the way back to New York on their motorcycles, or did they come back a different way? So they returned home to New York on the South Pacific Railway. They earned all kinds of headlines. Most of them were unwanted or rude, or totally ignored the fact that the writers were women. But the one that I particularly hate is the Denver Post would say that essentially these sisters used the war as a way to abandon their family duties at home and, quote, serving as an excellent excuse for women to stay away from home, to display physical prowess in various fields of masculine superiority, and to display their feminine contours in nifty khaki and leather uniforms. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Let them do what they want.
So basically, it's like these broads should be baking brownies for the war effort, but they're choosing to wear skin-tight leathers and show off them hips.
Yeah, that's pretty much. And they are not at home making babies.
I mean, to be fair, those articles would get written today.
I know, and that's why it makes me so mad. Like, it's so frustrating.
We've come so far, Angie. Look at this.
I know, right? But while they were unable to convince the Army to approve their applications as dispatch riders, or for women in general, not just themselves, some ladies would eventually be used for that job in World War II. But these ladies would become the first women to ride motorcycles coast to coast and summit Pikes Peak in Colorado. Real quick, though, I would like to tell you that they did not just go off into obscurity. Addie, the youngest, would go home and continue her teaching job while also learning her law degree in a time when female lawyers were not a thing.
So wait, what year is this?
1916.
Okay, so this is at the same time as my girl Grace Humiston.
I thought they were pretty close. I was thinking about that while I was writing this. So, like, they're few and far between in the female lawyers department, right?
I mean, yeah,
Gussie,
considering that they have the opportunity to become lawyers, as crazy as it is, but they cannot vote for said laws.
yeah, I think that is a bit weird as well. Gussie, with her motto of women can if she will, continued work as a stenographer until she became a pilot and flew with Amelia Earhart's 99. Have you ever heard of Amelia Earhart's 99?
No.
Neither had I, and I think it's this really interesting group of lady pilots. So there were 99 of them to begin with out of the 285 licensed female pilots at the time, who form a group to support each other mutually in social recruitment and business opportunities. So, and they're
Hell
still a group
yeah.
today. Yeah, it's an
Now,
international group now.
I would be curious as to if Bessie Coleman was a part of that, because my fear is that maybe she was excluded because she was Black.
I don't know. I'll have to look because I was wondering the same thing. They do have the organization does have a website, and I think you can use that website to see who was formerly a part of the group and who is currently a part of the group, which I think is pretty cool. And then I would like to end my story with two things. Firstly, I would like to point out that in 1915, Effie Hotchkiss made the same journey, only with her mother, Call Davis, riding shotgun in a sidecar. Can you
Dang,
imagine?
yes.
Right? So while Effie and Avis did it first, they did it different. So the Van Buren sisters got credit being the first to do it on individual bikes. But either way, all four of these ladies are badasses, and I hope to cover Effie and Avis one day because they're pretty fabulous, also.
I mean, the names alone.
Right? And I didn't include the picture, but the picture of Effie and Avis has Effie is the daughter, and she is on the motorcycle and Avis is sitting in the sidecar, and she is exactly what you would imagine a post-Victorian proper lady to be. Like, she's in her long day coat, sitting prim and proper in the sidecar, and just happy to be along for the ride. And I think that is the single greatest thing of the whole story is Miss Avis taking her daughter for a tour.
If my mother-daughter relationship with kiddo doesn't look like that when I'm older, I don't want it.
That's what I literally said that to Ian this morning when I was telling him that part of the story. I was like, if I'm not that kind of supportive parent, I'm doing something wrong. Like,
If my kid doesn't want to go cross country with me in a sidecar, I have failed.
right. Exactly my exact thoughts. I was like, if this is not me and Ethan in 10 years, I've done something terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Like, because he is absolutely the one that would grab a motorcycle and with a sidecar and be like, "Hey, mom." Owen would be like, how about we just sit on the couch and snuggle for the next 6 months? What do you think? And I'm here for that too, you know?
I mean, look, you just set up your calendar, right? You can do both.
Right. I mean, their love languages are both so different, and I'm here for both of them. And lastly, of all the stuff that I consumed while learning about this, I think that the Mental Floss article says it best. Quote, while their journey didn't deliver the immediate impact the sisters had hoped for, today they are remembered as pioneers for women and motorcyclists alike. Addie and Gussie's courageous spirit and intense independence is celebrated by descendants and admirers who have kept their legacy alive through cross-country rides that trace their path on the trips both 90th and 100th anniversary. Their great great niece Sarah Van Buren even learned to ride so she could participate in the 100th anniversary ride in 2016.
Oh, hell yes.
Right? I think that is so fantastic. Like, get it, girls. I'm here for your sense of adventure. Let's do the thing.
Yeah.
And that's my story. Safe and
Penny. Okay. All right. I love that. And I will say that that was probably a Theresa story,
Oh, good. Good.
which is great because do you know about the Great New England Vampire Panic?
I love the Great New England Vampire Panic. Yes. Hit me. I'm here for it.
Okay. My sources started off in a Smithsonian Magazine article, The Great New England Vampire Panic by Abigail Tucker, a Damned Connecticut article, The Jewett City Vampires, Griswold by Ray Bendici, and the podcast Gabbin' in the Woods, episode 79, The Jewett City Vampires.
The podcast is called Gabbin' in the Woods, like we had a good gab.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love
as
that.
in, and it's two Australians. It's a okay, so they do a decent job. They're very similar to us, but they have a lot of Australian banter.
Okay.
And so it is incredibly obscene. Like I put our explicit tag on here just because we occasionally slip up and say something. There is no occasionally with these two.
I don't think there really is with Australians, to be honest.
No, and they talk about things so I mean, they pull no punches, but like, male and female co-hosts, and they just openly talk about things that I probably would only talk to my husband about. And I'm like, I didn't realize I was a prude until I heard how freely they spoke of body parts. And just
And you're
went,
like, excuse me.
yeah, I guess I am going to clutch my pearls here. I didn't realize I had that within me, but good to know.
Let me tell you, I am currently reading a book series that I did not ever set out to read, and I'm loving every bit of it. But there are parts of it that I literally have to put the book down and be like, Ian, I gotta tell you this.
Yeah, like
Because
I can't tell anybody else other than somebody who has seen my naughty bits.
yeah, like I need you to explain this to me. Help me here. And he's like, oh dear God.
Oh, okay.
The man is like vicariously reading the entire series through me. Like he knows exactly what's going on. And the funny thing is it's not that it's a high fantasy series. There's not a ton of the naughty bits, but when they're there,
Right.
you're like, oh my God. Oh
Okay. Okay.
heavens.
So, all right, I'll start my story.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Um, Children are playing on a hillside gravel mine, like you do, like kids do, right? Like, and this was back in the 90s. So this is when we were all feral. And they find the first graves. One runs home to tell his mom. Mom is like, you didn't find graves. And then the boy produces a skull, a human skull.
As you do, to prove to mom that you found a grave.
Yep. And so now mom is like, holy crap.
Perhaps you
And
found a grave.
yeah, perhaps you kids are onto something. And so this is 1990 in Griswold, Connecticut, and the police, when they originally roll up, they think that these burials might be linked to a local serial killer named Michael Ross.
Okay.
And so they tape off the whole area, and they realize fairly quickly that the brown decaying bones are basically more than a century old.
Well,
And that's when they bring in Connecticut State archaeologist Nick Bellantoni. And he's determining that this is a colonial era farm cemetery.
okay.
And the thoughts are okay, this is fairly common in New England. There's scads of unmarked family plots. And in this one plot, they find 29 burials that are typical of the 1700s, early 1800s. And the dead, here's where it gets kind of sad. Many of them are children because, life expectancies and child
Right.
mortality rates. They're all laid to rest in what is described as a thrifty Yankee style. It's simple wooden coffins. They don't have jewelry on. Most of them are not wearing a lot of clothing. And you got to think about it. Clothing was pretty hard to come by.
Right,
And so,
right. So,
if you could, hand me down that robe, that whatever, you would. And many of them have their arms resting by their sides or crossed over their chests.
okay.
That is, except for burial number 4.
Okay.
And Bellantoni, he's immediately interested in this grave even before the excavation begins. It's only one of two stone crypts in the cemetery.
Okay. The rest are just simple, like 6 feet deep burials.
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
but
Okay.
I mean, one of two stone crypts and your eyes don't go to it first. I don't know how you go for the standard graves when there's crypts there. I mean, their priorities were a bit different than mine.
Yeah, I would have gone straight for the crypts too.
Yeah, yeah. So they immediately start scraping away soil with flat edge shovels and brushes and bamboo picks. And they're working through trying to unearth this. And that's when Bellantoni lifted the first of the large flat rocks that form the roof. And he uncovered the remains of a red painted coffin and a pair of skeleton feet.
Just the feet?
Well, that's what he sees first, because there's like a series
Oh,
of,
yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I
yeah.
gotcha.
So he can only open the first chunk, and that's the first thing he sees. And he says it's in perfect anatomical position. And then he raises the next stone and he sees the rest of the individual had, quote, been completely rearranged, unquote. The
Well, yeah,
skeleton had been,
you got to rearrange them so they can't get back together.
well, from your lips to God's ears. Because the skeleton had been beheaded, the skull and thigh bones rested atop the ribs and vertebrae to look like a skull and crossbones motif, like a Jolly Roger. And he said he'd never seen anything like it. And then subsequent analysis shows that the beheading had come along with other injuries, including rib fractures, and that these had occurred about 5 years after death. Oh, and somebody's also smashed the coffin.
Of course.
For good measure.
Of course.
And so then the other skeletons in the gravel hillside are packaged for reburial, but not JB, the one that they've from this stone crypt. He is a 50-ish-year-old male skeleton from the 1830s, and they call him JB because of the initials that were spelled out in brass tacks on the coffin lid.
Okay.
Which that just seems so hardcore and so gothic, like I wanted a Viking funeral pyre, but I think I can be talked into a gaudy stone crypt if it's only one of two in the cemetery.
Like, if I can't have a pyre, I'll take a gothic crypt. I mean, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
am 100% with you on this.
Yeah. And so he's shipped to the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Washington, D.C. for further study. And meanwhile, Bellantoni, he starts networking. He's inviting other archaeologists and other historians, and they take a tour of the excavation. And he's like, basically like, hey, what the hell do you guys think is happening here? Like, I'm out of my depth. So he's phoning a friend and
Right. And
showing
then
off
there
his,
is the one historian there who also loves the paranormal and read a few books and has been like, hey, you don't cross bones for no reason. Just saying.
you're not on. Like, I mean, so give me a couple of paragraphs because you are right on track. So in the course of his research, he makes a call to a dude named Michael Bell, who is a Rhode Island folklorist. And if you go from archaeology to folklorist, you are running out of theories.
You're running out of options.
Right. And that's when we are officially grasping at straws and we are hoping that somebody knows what the fuck is going on.
This is like taking when an archaeologist finds something they can't figure out what it is and they take it to their grandma and their grandma's like, oh, you spin your yarn on that for knitting. But they pulled it out of the ground and it's been there for 5,000 years. Same thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was an ancient Sumerian, they kept finding these little pots.
Yeah.
And they were just like, what are these? And the male archaeologists were like, it had to be for men to, like, maybe it's a nutty pot, and they show it to a woman and a woman looks at it, goes, it's a baby bottle.
Yeah, same. It's the exact same thing. Like,
Yeah.
same energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Only calling Mulder instead of your mom.
Yeah, I want to believe.
And so the folklorist, he had spent basically the previous decade exploring, researching New England vampire exhumations. And the Griswold case occurs about the same time as the other cases that Bell's investigated. And so, the timing's right, the setting's right. Griswold is a rural agrarian. It's bordering the southern Rhode Island where multiple exhumations had occurred. And then many of the other vampires, like JB, had been disinterred, grotesquely tampered with, and then reburied. And in light of the tales that Bell is telling him of the violated corpses and posthumous rib fractures, they all begin to make sense. And then we see that the rib fractures likely occurred because they were rummaging through his chest, hoping to remove and probably burn his heart.
Yeah, okay,
And
that checks.
it's about this time that one of the colleagues asks, "You ever heard about the Jewett City Vampires?"
Like
Do
just
you know about
casually
the
over
Jewett
coffee.
City? Yeah, do you know about the Jewett City Vampires?
Um, I'm not sure that I do. I
Okay.
know I think I know of JB, but I don't the name Jewett doesn't ring a bell to me, so
Okay. So in 1854, one article says it's a neighboring city. When you look it up, you see that Jewett City is actually a borough of Griswold.
okay.
So basically same area, right? Um, Still in Connecticut, town people exhumed several corpses suspected to be vampires that were rising from their graves to kill the living. There's a few newspaper accounts of these events that survives. And had the Griswold, so basically they're asking, had this grave been desiccated for the same reason that the Jewett City Vampires did? And what we need to kind of go back in time is that there was this whole aura of fear that happened, right? There's tons of areas in Connecticut and the surrounding area that use Satan or hell or the devil in how they describe it.
Right.
And
Right, right,
and
right.
so basically it's just steeped in fear of darkness and Satan and underworld and the whole nine. And this is about 40 years before Bram Stoker would publish Dracula,
You said
which
40
is
years
kind of,
before.
yeah.
Okay, I'm just
So
making sure I got the timeline right.
so basically all this is happening, Bram Stoker is writing notes.
Right, right, right. Okay.
So but we I just want to set the scene so we have an understanding of what is happening here. The and it's the article. One of the articles says that the type of the parasitic entities that the Connecticut residents thought that existed, they're not debonair, romantic, or bloodsuckers of fiction. They're not, the Count Vlad, Edward, or Lestat, the vampires of the 19th century. They're more of the zombie-like rise from the grave to find nourishment in the blood of family members.
Right. Okay. That is very
And
unfortunate.
this reminds me, I'd heard of Mercy Brown. Do you know who Mercy Brown is?
The name rings a bell. Is she the one tuberculosis? Am
Yeah,
I
so she has tuberculosis. She dies in the middle of winter. The ground's frozen, so they can't bury her. And so they put her in a coffin in the backyard sort of deal. Um, Basically, she's gonna freeze solid. We'll bury her in the spring. And because tuberculosis is a communicable disease, her family members start dying.
Yeah, okay.
And
Okay.
the villagers are like, oh my gosh, it must be her rising from the dead. And because she's frozen, she hasn't decayed. So that's an indication of vampirism. And
Science
you know what I
people.
right. And so it's obviously, and then because when you die, your skin recedes from your cuticles, making it look like your nails have grown.
Oh, right, right,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So there's a couple of biological things that occur. And so they're like, oh my gosh, she's still living, and
Ugh.
so they end up desecrating her body. And I think they end up if I'm not mistaken, and I didn't do a ton of verification on this, they end up pulling her heart from her chest, burning it, making a tonic of it, and then making her sick brother drink that tonic because that should fix it. And he
Oh
dies.
God.
He
Yeah,
dies.
you
Spoiler.
don't say.
Yeah, apparently that kind of folk medicine didn't quite pan out. But anyhow, so back to the Jewett City vampires. So basically, there's this family called the Rays of Jewett City, and over the course of 9 years, they lose multiple people in their family to consumption, modern day tuberculosis, the Victorian of Victorian illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And the first to die of a mysterious
So
illness.
gothic.
I mean, it is the quintessential. Like, it's either going to be that or childbirth. That's the only way you
That's
can
it.
die in those days.
Or falling down the stairs.
I'll accept it. I'll
Okay.
accept falling down the stairs for 200, Alex. So the first to die is 24-year-old Lemuel. It's like Samuel, but with Le, it's just Sam.
Okay.
In 1845. And then less than 4 years later, so there's a 4-year gap, the family patriarch, Henry B. Ray, dies by the same illness. And then 2 years later, 26-year-old Elisha goes. So that's like a decent time period with years in between. But apparently, they're assuming, well, they died like a decade ago, so it must be the same like the logic train fails. I would like to see like more 6 months kind of deal as opposed to like multiple years.
Yeah, because you would think like, what are they rising every 2 years to have a bite to eat? Like what?
Yeah, but it's like 4 years later, and that's when they finally got hungry.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's just silly.
Yeah. Okay, but anyhow, 3 years later, 1854, the oldest son, Henry, now starts getting the same symptoms. And that's when panic sets in. And they're convinced they're dealing with something that's well beyond the normal disease, as opposed to like, hey, this is kind of how people are opting out of life. Like, this is just kind of
the thing. It's all the rage
yeah.
right now.
Yeah. I mean, if you were in France, it would be what, syphilis? Look,
every country's got one.
Right. You spin your wheel, pick your poison. So they're deciding that they need to do something drastic to really kind of offset all of this. And so according to newspapers at the time, the pure intent is to protect the living, not necessarily like to desecrate the dead. So they decide to dig up the decomposing bodies of Lemuel and Elisha and burn them immediately. Although it appears that they don't go after the body of Joseph Sr., it's believed that this incendiary action did the trick because history doesn't say a specific date for Henry's demise, so it seems that he survived this affliction.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, he didn't die. We were right. We stopped it. We stopped the vampires.
Woo!
I know. Kind of gross. And so that happens 2 miles away from Hopeville, where the original 29 graves that I started the story were found.
You said 2 miles?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to say it was about 40 years. There was like a 40-year gap between these two areas, but then like 40, like 2 miles away. So you have kind of a setup where, like, you remember when I did the dancing plagues?
Mm-hmm.
And how like that wasn't the first dancing plague and it wasn't the last. It was just kind of the biggest. But it was all within the same geographical region.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of this setup for this is how you deal with stress and having a mental break and,
Yeah.
So
some of us dance, some of us have vampire problems, whatever.
Exactly. I mean, some of us dance till our feet break and we fall over dead. And then the others of us just, feel that the only way to survive tuberculosis is to dig up those you love.
Yeah, clearly.
But, like, think about that. Your kid dies and you have to stomach the thought of disinterring them and desecrating their body.
Not a chance.
You know what I mean? Like, there is some deep-seated darkness there that you would have to go through. Like, that is a lot for a therapist to unpack.
Yeah, and that really wasn't a thing back then either. So it's really more of a lot for a bottle of alcohol to unpack.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, and even if, I mean, you're not going to assume my kid's a vampire unless you've gone through the full list and tried everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so easy for us to look at it and be like, and so they thought vampire, as opposed to being like, no, that probably took a decent period of time before they got there. Because it took years for the Ray family to go, okay, we've lost 3 people.
It's
We've
got to
been
be
grieving for a
vampires.
while. It's, we've tried everything else. We've rubbed some dirt on it. We tried walking it off. This hasn't worked.
We rub dirt on it. Works for everything else.
I mean, shoot, that's something I grew up doing. It's like rub some dirt on it.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, you can eat dirt. Dirt's fine. It's not gonna kill you. Everybody eats dirt.
Yeah. Dirt's our friend.
Okay, so when we're going back to that grave in Hopeville with the red coffin, when they looked at it, it did show signs of consumption, as did several of the family members. So they're like, yeah, of course, this is definitely one of those vampire burials. And even
Obviously.
though, I mean, but it's like you can see that they had tuberculosis in their systems, and then you can see this response. So it does match both time and place.
Okay.
So we've got motive, we've got opportunity.
That's sad.
It really is, especially when you think about all the steps you have to go through as a grieving family to get to that place.
Yeah.
So even though it's all speculation, it does seem that we have consumption ravaging the entire Ray family before somebody recalls that situation 2 miles away with the Walton family up the road. And so they had done the exact same tried and true preventative action to re-kill the dead.
Ugh.
Yeah. And obviously, like these are other cases. I mean, we brought up Mercy Brown, and you don't have a great New England vampire panic with only 2 cases. You know what I mean? Like there are others. These are just.
Yeah, but I
You were
feel
gonna say
like
something?
no, I was, but no, go on. I was gonna make a joke and then I decided it was not
I'm
necessary.
I'm I'm basically at the end of my story. I mean, if you want to make a joke, go for it. I'm not gonna like serve up more child vampires.
No, it wasn't even funny. So I took
Oh,
it back.
okay. That's fair. That's fair. That gives me less to edit out later when you text me and you go, delete that. Delete that. I can't
Please
let that on
delete
the
that.
internet
Oh my god, I can't believe I said that.
out loud with my
Outside of my
voice,
own brain.
using my mouth hole.
And then you had to hear it with your ear holes. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Mm.
My apologies. Please accept these cupcakes that are being Instacarted. Um, so what ends up being interesting is that there's a book that kind of chronicles this. It's Michael E. Bell's Food for the Dead on the Trail of the New England Vampires,
Mm.
which feels like something I wish I would have known and like, kind of been like, I'm going to pocket the story and I'm going to read the book and I'm going to really enjoy this. But then it'll be like a 3-part episode as opposed to like, doing a quick and dirty one now. So, but I mean, one of the articles ends on this line that I feel it kind of makes sense. We look at it as extreme, but in retrospect, we know it wasn't necessary. But making extra sure that the dead stay dead made everyone feel better, and that doesn't suck, right?
I guess.
I mean, but it's like you think about it, it's like, okay, you have to go through all of that mental issue to get people through it, to grieve, to come together, to heal. And it's like, if
Yeah.
this is what it's going to take, it sucks, but it is what it is.
I guess, yeah. I always think about the fact that like these are also the same area of people that assume that just because you know how to get rid of a headache and you happen to not wear pants that you're a witch. Like
You're
it's
not wrong.
the same logic of and and the funny thing, I guess, well, it's not funny. The other thing to that is that their actions are out of fear, right?
Mm.
So fear does weird things to how your brain processes stuff.
I mean, it shuts down, so you have an inability to process stuff.
Right. So it's such an interesting thing that like I understand that this is a geographical location of, not very far from one another type thing. So I could really see the similarities and oh well, if this happened over at the Walton farm, then that's clearly what we have to do here because it's obviously the same problem. Like, I very much
Yeah.
see how people's brains work like that, but like, you have to wonder if at any point there was someone in the back going, I don't actually.
It had to be because it took years for them to do that to the Waltons.
Right.
Years. So it was somebody going, uh, look, maybe not. Maybe we should just wash our hands and
I
eat
was
more
just gonna
greens
say
and
that.
drink more water.
Perhaps if we just, you know, wash our hands.
Yeah, like have we eaten a vegetable today?
Yeah. It's sad, but it's such an interesting, I love the way humanity works at trying to solve its problems, even in its gruesomeness. Like, oh, well, clearly we need to break their bones. We need to desecrate these graves. Otherwise, it's just going to keep happening. It's the superstition of it all, I guess.
Well, and you think about it, how many, like, there have been multiple superstitions or things that we have done as a race that has actually progressed us to move forward.
Yeah.
Like, if you hear something in the woods, no, you didn't.
Oof. Life saving.
And it's like, actually, I don't need to use my Caucasian curiosity to go venture into the woods because I hear a woman screaming when it's actually a mountain lion.
It's okay. I know that I'm a white woman who wears leggings and flip flops. I don't actually need to go in the woods. It's fine.
Yeah.
Just because you think
You
you
know what I
heard it,
mean?
no, you
Yeah,
didn't.
exactly that.
Yeah. But I also don't live in
Uh,
Appalachia, so there's that.
but we do have cougars in both of our backyards. And
That's
like,
true.
like there have been like some cougars in certain screams do sound like women screaming.
Oh yeah,
And
they
if
do.
you heard a woman screaming, you might try to help as opposed to running straight towards an apex predator.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I did have this experience of all superstitious experiences the other night. Our bedroom windows were open. Ian was sound asleep, and I was happily reading when all of a sudden I hear footprints in the backyard. And I'm like, oh no, what is that? Like, though that's not cat feet. That's like something with some weight to it.
Yeah.
Huh. And then I hear him again, and I hear him again, and I'm like, what the heck? And then right underneath my window, I hear, oh my God, what is that? So the first thought that comes to my mind is it's probably the dog next door got into our backyard.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I'm with you there.
Right. So I get up and I go to the window and I'm looking and I can't see him anywhere. And then I hear feet again. And I'm like, oh my God, there's maybe it's a person in our backyard. Until it occurs to me that I am hearing two sets of feet every time this individual walks. So I am convinced now it is the dog next door. He walks
Okay.
all the way through the flowers, all the way around the pool, and back to the other side. And I kid you not, for a solid 15 to 30 seconds, we just looked at each other in the dark. Like him trying to
The
figure
dog
me out.
and
Yeah,
you or the animal?
it
Okay,
was
because I was
definitely
just
the
like,
dog.
okay.
Yeah. But for that 15 seconds of staring at him, I was like, is this going to be have to wake Ian up and tell him there's a strange animal in our backyard that is not the neighbor's dog?
Mm,
Or that El Chupacabra's here, or any of the old gods have returned. How do I go about doing this?
right.
And then I looked at him and said, hey, go home. And just like that, he was gone. So the next couple days, I go out there and I'm like, yeah, it was definitely the neighbor's dog. Like, he's left me gifts. Thank you so much.
Mm.
And he also knows what hey go home is because I tried it on him in the sunlight and he looked at me like, well, that was rude, but then turned around and went home. I was like, okay, so you're my midnight prowler. I'm here for this.
Yeah.
Don't have to worry about Cthulhu or anything like that, so we're doing all right. But superstition the whole time, like, what is it? Is it a mummy? Is it a zombie? Is
Could it
it
be?
could it? Is it Dracula himself? That's a weird way to try to get in. Which I've been informed that my welcome mats are too welcoming and I should do something about it. Superstition at its finest.
I mean, you're not wrong, but that's exactly it.
Oh,
So you ready to
absolutely.
call this episode so that I can figure out how to edit all of this fun stuff?
All my clicks. I saw
Uh,
that, and you can't see the face I'm making back at you, but just know it's very similar.
I'm here for it. So if you've enjoyed hanging out with us and you're thinking, yeah, I like these guys, give us a follow, give us a rate or review us, and really let us know what you think. But keep those 1 stars to yourself because we are the only single stars in our hearts. And if you're like, I'm going to give these girls an email, tell them what I really think, you can do so at unhinged.historypod@gmail.com. And on that note, goodbye.
Bye.